Welcome to What a Word is Worth, a space for creative minds to speak about viable ways to heal the world through writing and other inventive mediums. This is your host, Marianela Medrano. I am the founder of Palabra Training Center, where words are given as medicine. Palabra Training Center is dedicated to creating a more compassionate and just world by training those who are invested and committed to making changes or to make change possible. We offer writing workshops, mental wellness retreats, and other ways that teach emotional and psychological flexibility through mindfulness practices that bring together our inner and outer world in a harmonious, healing manner. We welcome people from all walks of life, financial means, and physical challenges. If you would like to learn more or feel inspired to become a supporter, please visit palabracenter.org. Today, my guest is Deborah Eden Tull, founder of Mindful Living Revolution. She teaches the integration of compassionate awareness in every aspect of our lives. She is a Zen meditation and engaged Dharma teacher, public speaker, author, and sustainability educator. She trained for 7 years as a Buddhist monk at a silent Zen monastery and has taught engaged meditation for over 20 years. Eden has lived in sustainable communities and as an organic gardener farmer for decades and celebrates the essential wisdom of nature. Her books include Relational Mindfulness, a handbook for deepening our connection with ourselves, each other, and the planet, and The Natural Kitchen, your guide for the sustainable food revolution, and then Luminous Darkness, an engaged Buddhist approach to embracing the unknown, will be released by Shambhala Press in September 2022. Eden's her work bridges personal and collective awakening, emphasizing the spiritual, interpersonal, transpersonal, societal, ecological, and global impacts of engaged awareness practice. She also teaches the work that reconnects, created by Buddhist scholar Joanna Macy, for transforming our pain and love for our world into compassionate action, and offers transformative online trainings in the heart of listening and regenerative leadership. Eden has a gift for facilitating transformative inquiry, fierce compassion, and relational intelligence. She weaves Dharma with her embodiment of deep ecology, shamanism, and conscious movement dance to help people release collective biases that have been passed down over generations. She draws upon her own experience of navigating loss, illness, and trauma, guiding people to embrace the mystery and celebrate the value of both light and darkness as teachers of love. Thank you so much, Eden, for being here with us.
I'm grateful to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, I was saying to you, what a generous thing to respond to a virtual stranger. In your book, Relational Mindfulness, a topic of great interest for me, you write about sensitivity and vulnerability as states we can hold as our greater strengths. I am thinking of the tale of Buddha talking to his friend, the musician Srona Kotovinsa, who played his sitar for Buddha and his disciples. And at the end of the concert, they spoke about the spiritual path. And the Buddha asked the musician, what are the consequences when the string is too tight or when it is too loose? To which the musician replied, when the string is too loose, it cannot be played. When it is too tight, it breaks easily. So Buddha used the conversation to emphasize that spiritual growth and evolution is much like playing a string instrument, like playing the sitar. It should not be too tight, nor too loose. So my question is, what are you seeing in 2022? Have we perhaps crossed over to the other side, a side where social media is the platform for emoting in words, in ways never seen? Is it possible we have gone too far into the extreme with how we express vulnerability and sensitivity? If we have, how do we reach a middle way? How do we stay in moderation? Is the use of social media, for instance, a way to unconsciously use the relational field to affirm self-consciousness, to use your own words, as we swing between perfection or suffocating vulnerability? What are your thoughts?
Such a rich question or set of questions. So thank you. As I sit with this question, first to just presence that there is a great tear in the fabric of human relationship in this day and age, and to really let ourselves feel and sense the loss around this tear, the sadness, and also feel and sense into our responsibility and our capacity as human beings who have a tremendous potential for relational intelligence woven into our true nature, to take responsibility and to be part of healing this. And in terms of social media, it's really layered, isn't it? There are so many ways that it gets used to, yes, affirm self-consciousness, affirm our relationship to the conditioned mind, both our personal conditioning and the collective field of conditioning, stories that are just no longer serving humanity. They haven't been for a really long time. But what I want to say is, due to the intersubjective nature of conditioning, that means, well, due to the intersubjective nature of conditioning, it's sometimes hard to sense that, oh, because my neighbor is believing this, my friend's believing this other person on social media is believing it. It's actually not true, but it's hard for me to see that clearly because it's shared conditioning. So I want to say that. I also want to acknowledge that there are wonderful ways that people are using, especially through the pandemic, technology and Zoom and the screen for deepening connection, for showing up and experiencing, as I just led a 10-day transformative retreat on Zoom, that we can show up and actually rest into our deeper presence with one another, not through the sort of visual and auditory field only, but dropping into deeper presence. And we can do that through Zoom, we can. But in terms of your question, something you said struck me. Our sensitivity is our greatest strength. Our vulnerability is our greatest strength. But that doesn't mean that our capacity to emote is our greatest strength. In other words, we want to have really full relationships with our emotions. We are not our thoughts. We are not our emotions. And our emotions need to be deeply honored. But our sensitivity and vulnerability, that's actually something else. For me, that comes from the heart of our being as humans and the core of who we are. And it's a very empathetic, fiercely compassionate.
Or conditionings. So I think they're relevant to what you're saying. In the book, Enough with the Talking Points, Reggie Mara describes cultural givens as provisions we receive at birth and throughout our earliest years. These are direct experiences of and beliefs about the world that our family of origin carries, which includes everything from ethnicity to local community to religious beliefs and or lack thereof, to national citizenship, to our parents' personalities, to geography. So before these cultural givens come to us, let me think.
Take your time.
Yeah, let me. Before these cultural givens, we have, going back to your point, our direct way of knowing and our natural intelligence, as you point out in your book. We are whole and ready to go. Then we are cultured. We are given teachings as ways of being in the world. And you write about us learning to stand outside, looking in, us learning to assess, compare, label, like, dislike. So this is something that comes up often in my work with people as well. We know that over time we become so familiar with these behaviors that trusting our own inner guidance is difficult. And these cultural givens or conditioned beliefs create a sense of distrust of the inner and outer world. So how do we heal? I guess my question, I told you that I go around the bushes. It's a Dominican thing. My direct question here, how do we heal from this exile or what you call the myth of separation? And I like how you were envisioning or redirecting the use of media and the use of technology, right? But how do we heal from this exile or what we call, or what you call the myth of separation when it happens, right? Not when we are using it intentionally, but when it puts us in this so difficult place of wanting to be something, wanting to project something out there that becomes almost like an obsession.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just taking a moment to pause and sit with what you shared. And I think everyone listening, we can all tune in and just sense into how what I call the mind of separation operates in each and every one of us. So as you pointed out, the beliefs, the assumptions, the stories that we've been fed through society, family, religion, media, through particular life experiences or traumas that happened for each of us. Taking it a step larger, acknowledging that there is also collective conditioning passed down through the generations, and so much that we're facing today as a collective that is about learning how to see clearly, bring healing to, free ourselves from these biases. Yeah. And it certainly begins with compassionate awareness, learning how to step back, which is one of the biggest gifts of a meditation or mindfulness practice or other forms of embodied awareness practice, stepping back and learning how to become the witness, the observer. This is part of why I teach deep listening as a way of life and a path of leadership. We can either listen shallowly, I'm pointing up here a lot, to the thoughts that we are invested in, that we've come to know as who we are, that present limitations that we abide by, the thoughts in our head, or we can drop much more deeply. Again, I'm going to point to a deeper center of intelligence that has to do with the integration of body, mind, spirit. Meditation points us to this, but bringing compassionate awareness so we can use everyday life as a laboratory for seeing clearly, oh, there's a thought coming up that's beginning, that I'm getting pulled into, that I know where this path takes me, or I sense that this is causing more separation than affirming my connection with wholeness and the divine. And for all of us, we have the invitation in everything that we do to let awareness be our guide in waking up beyond the myth of separation. It's gone pretty far, yeah? And really letting our, our love and pain for our world inspire us.
Yeah, waking up from the myth of separation. And, so let's talk a little bit about mindfulness as an instrument for that. And it's implicit notion of remembering that is at the heart of mindfulness. You use relational mindfulness as a way to use daily life and relationships to remember who we are. In mindful writing, which is something that I often offer to people, I work with the concept of remembering our body into wholeness. I talk about how difficult experiences tend to make us disembodied, like we leave the body. Like I'm thinking racism or any form of discrimination, it has that effect on us, that we leave the body. So in mindful writing, we write from and with the body to remember, as in bringing all body parts back in connection. So you said that, and I'm going to quote you, you said that when we are distracted by the loud voices of conditioning, we are not able to hear the subtle messages of our bodies, our emotions, our needs, our intuition, or one another. We are not available to take care of ourselves or to pay genuine attention to one another. So can you say more about the role of soma, the body, in co-creating relational mindfulness?
Happily, yes. Thank you for bringing it back to embodiment, the body, because any practice of, when I say compassionate awareness, this is a practice of subtle body awareness. And we are deepening our pathways both to inner connection, the pathways with which we can sense, listen to, receive guidance, honor our own bodies and our own truth, our deeper selves, we might say. There's so much different language we could use, but equally the pathways to interconnection. So sometimes I speak of this as non-local awareness. If we really are honest, we can acknowledge that each and every one of us is part of the natural feedback system of planet Earth and of our collective. So again, our willingness to listen deeply rather than shallow listen, even though conditioned voices within and in our society are loud and insistent and redundant, but that deep listening connects us most honestly with our earth body. In my new book, I talk about multinatural awareness, that as I'm guiding people to go deeper and deeper in practice, it's quite natural that even if they were fed a belief system that focuses on anthropocentricity or the human realm as the highest or primary realm, they start getting more and more in touch with multinatural awareness, a sense of connection with all beings. Of course, this is the essence of Buddhism, but also ability to listen, to realize that the cosmos is speaking to you all the time. If you're paying attention, then you can be available for that conversation. But this conversation happens through the instrument of our bodies. And our bodies are incredible, incredible instruments for relational intelligence. So for the larger conversation. Now, if most of us going to school as kids, for instance, were taught, let me turn you on to the instrument of your body and its full capacity and the relational intelligence that you're here for. But many of us, well, I'll just speak for myself, though I came from a family of progressives and artists and activists, the cultural context was one of individualism, competition, trying to make the grade, judgment. And so it was more like, back to your question about sensitivity, my sensitivity was often something that I needed to hide or tone down. Later, when I got turned on to relational intelligence as medicine for our times, then I really came to understand, no, that sensitivity is one of our greatest strengths and medicine we need right now to heal collectively. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And yes, it is the vehicle of the body that can take us to what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing, right? I think that's, yeah. So going back to your book, Relational Mindfulness, you write about relationships and, you said something that the quality of every relationship we will ever have begins with the quality of the relationship we have with ourselves. So I am thinking of us, people of color, colonized people who have been told we are not okay, we are not lovable, we are ugly. Maybe loving the self does not come that easy. What would you say to someone who say they don't know how to love themselves? And as a therapist and a workshop facilitator, I hear this a lot. So what will you say to someone who says they don't know how to love themselves because all the messages from the outer world point to being in deficit, to not being good enough? Maybe the effort is more about, for us, it's more about always becoming more or better. And it leaves little room for establishing a trusting relationship with oneself. So what will you say, for instance, to a Latina or a Black girl learning to see herself as beautiful against the beauty archetypes that point to whiteness as a standard ideal beauty? And I'm thinking, I don't know, I don't want to, but maybe this connects to your point about returning to the authority of the heart. I don't know if that's too, I don't know. Tell me what you think about.
Yes, first, I think you do know it does connect to returning to the authority of the heart. And while I can only speak from my direct experience, having guided and mentored so many people from so many different walks of life over decades now, what's arising for me is the story of when the Dalai Lama first came to the United States. I just want to offer this. He had his first interview with a student, and the story goes the student came in and started talking about how I'm not good enough and I don't measure up and I don't meet the standards. And the Dalai Lama noted, this is new. I'm not used to hearing this narrative before. Interesting. Okay. And then in came the next person. and it was the same story. And he talks about it was an entire day of just that story. That was part of the American narrative, if I might. It's facing self-hatred and the self-hatred that's been passed down over so many generations. Let's go globally for a minute. Through patriarchy, through colonialism, through racial capitalism, through a deep separation from the natural world. I could go on, but we know, wow, there is so much trauma in our shared field right now around this not enoughness, this deep sense of either self-hatred or insufficiency. Is that on track with what you're pointing to?
Absolutely.
Specific to the community you're talking about. And so we have so much healing to do around this. There's a lot I could say about this. And also just share personally, to be transparent, this has certainly been a big part of my own path, simply through life traumas and experiences that led to me too not having quite a sense of how to learn to love this being, this human. And so what I want to affirm right now is that something shifts when we're invited to pay attention in this non-judgmental way, to replace judgment with curiosity. That's always the first step in practice. And to just say, I'm willing to start bringing more curiosity to my human experience, to the conditioning that's been fed to me, and to how that impacts me. And when we start paying attention more, right, within, there's naturally a compassion which is innate to each and every one of us. It's not part of us, it's who we are, as far as I can tell, as far as I've witnessed over the years. And there's a lot of conditioning that gets layered on top of it for some. But we start then calling upon and being able to call upon the compassion to see this human with eyes anew, to see this human freshly. I call it seeing from the heart. So shifting from actually seeing ourselves through the hierarchical, judgmental, based in conditional love paradigm that is part of the dominant paradigm today, okay? And actually softening that lens and learning instead to see with the heart ourselves first and foremost. And from there, we're able to see all beings differently. I also sometimes talk about it as seeing in the dark, learning to see in the dark, because we're learning how to soften that part of our brain and our habit of superficiality and of, again, hierarchical perception. We could talk a lot about the damage hierarchical perception has done to humans, to the BIPOC community, most dramatically, and other communities that are marginalized. But I would say from the lens of hierarchical perception, there's a way that while that's existing as a dominant way of being, no one is free. Even those who are quote unquote appear to be at the top of the ladder, they're going to be living in fear of not, because of how deeply ingrained this has become in the dominant paradigm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's one of the things that I appreciate the most about specifically the work that you do in relational mindfulness is how you point, at least this is what I'm perceiving, that you're pointing us to move from the personal, transpersonal into the interpersonal collective in order to heal the myth of separation. And I think that's what you're pointing us to, that yes, the pain is there. Yes, there is a narrative that was handed down to us. And that in order for us to heal that narrative, we have to first land here in the darkness that the possible narrative creates in us.
Yes, and we learn to practice discomfort resiliency. I talk
Yes.
about both dark and light being teachers of love. I
Mhm.
know that in my own life, all of those shadows that I've had to face, all of those places where I really was deeply believing the conditioning I'd received, that this person is far from good enough and
Yeah.
doesn't measure up, and whatever it is. Uh, facing It is in facing the dark with our hearts open and with curiosity as our guide, rather than judgment, that we allow the space for transformation, for alchemy, emotional alchemy, for I could go on and on. That the power of learning how to meet the teacher of
Yeah.
darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and I
within.
also Yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes. And I also just want to underline, based on what you just shared, it was when I left the monastery where I trained for 7 years, an incredible privilege to live in the wilderness, training in
Mhm.
silence for 7 years. And when I came out, and I came out because I had, unbeknownst to me, been bit by a tick and contracted Lyme. So I really
Mhm.
had an illness to work with for the next decade, a great
Mhm.
spiritual teacher. But
Mhm.
I was suddenly living in the city of Los Angeles, of all places, and became aware not only of how much a practice of presence has to offer healing in the relational field, that it really positions us to let every interaction become healing, become transformational. But I also became aware that I had come to a place of so much acceptance within my own self, and still, because of popular social contracts and conditioning, there were situations I found myself in where it was like, oh, well, maybe other people are hiding their imperfections, so maybe I'm supposed to hide my vulnerability, or other people aren't showing their whole multidimensional self. They're trying to show parts of themselves that they think are acceptable, so maybe I'm supposed to do that. And it didn't feel right at all. So I knew I wanted to cultivate more of a practice and teaching, really anchored in transparency and deep listening and healing, through how we show up to one another, being our whole selves, our naked selves.
Mhm.
What that offers one another is
Yeah.
big, and the healing it affirms within. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, you know, I want you to say more about meditation, mindfulness as as a tool for going into the darkness. And you know, most beginner meditators, if they are honest, will say that a lot of undesirable emotions come up when they sit in meditation. So what will you say to someone who is beginning this process of presencing what's happening first within, you know, before we can even tend to what is happening, and especially say more about meditation as a portal into better relationships with others, since we need community so much. And while our ability to be in community relates to being with ourselves, um, what do you want the novice meditator to know about showing up, about holding space for themselves and for others? What, I
Mhm,
mean, you say
mhm.
quite a bit of that, but I'm just wondering if you can go deeper a little bit for someone who's
Sure.
just beginning
Yeah.
to
Well,
meditate.
first, for someone who's just beginning, I believe that deep listening is one of the most simple to access and profound tools that we have. Committing to showing up day and night in deep listening. Remember,
Yeah.
deep rather than shallow listening. So we're learning how to, in order to deep listen, to be as present as we can, to drop into our receptivity, the natural receptivity of our bodies. Now, this actually sometimes terrifies people because receptivity, though it's not actually passive, it's an action, but a relational action, it requires a softening. And most people within the dominant paradigm are very, very conditioned to be active, producing, doing. Remember, I got to make something of myself all the time. I got to defend myself. I got to protect myself. And so from the illusion of separation, the sense of separate self, that's the mode we're in. So being willing to learn how to actually and give yourself permission more, rest and deep listening. And that impacts, of course, how you relate with yourself and with others. But meditation itself, each time you sit on the cushion, it's a practice of learning to listen to life as it unfolds. You can learn this in so many ways. You can go sit by a tree that you feel safe with. If you don't feel safe with humans, it takes many people a long time, and just listen to a tree. You can learn how to listen to a compelling piece of music with your whole body, doing less rather than doing more. That deepens deep listening. And you can begin to show up to conversations really resting in that receptivity that is part of your strength. I would also just say that it's quite natural, even if at the beginning of someone's meditation practice, they might think they're doing it to find a quick fix way to inner peace or to find an island of peace. But there is no island of peace. And we wake up through our love for all beings, our responsibility to all beings, feeling the support of all beings, and on behalf of all beings. So we wake up from the myth of separation. So I believe that this does require both personal practice and relational practice, community practice. So when things do come up at the beginning, you start noticing more emotions come up. I have a chapter in my new book about moving to silent monastery, and suddenly and the anger, unlike any I'd faced in my life, was here to face. And we understand that all of these things are coming up to be healed. There's finally an invitation, a space for compassion. And what wise being, all aspects of our self carry wisdom, what wise being wouldn't show up to say, okay, I'm going to come up now to allow this healing. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to require work and some real emotional, spiritual midwifery, but we are certainly all built for it, and all built to support one another through it. That's really, really important. So having a community of deep listeners, that's a really, really invaluable investment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that points to this idea of, relational mindfulness being the way to heal the collective shadow, right? It's a collective endeavor. What comes up in that anger that you're describing, which I'm so familiar with, it's the collective shadow, right?
Yes. And I know when I, at that time, investigated the sort of primordial fire of my anger, this energy that I was taught to turn away from, that I was taught was bad, that was counter to this sort of pleasant person persona people are, encouraged to take on, whatever. I really understood clearly that it was in my ancestral DNA. That, for instance, in my family, the persecution that Jews experienced through the Holocaust, the pogroms, on and on, that got passed down. Of course it all does. So the point being, my anger became an incredible ally. It expanded the shapes I was willing to take in my life to greater embodiment. It expanded my capacity for joy and ecstasy and courage and love, because anger was now an ally. I was befriending the anger and also learning how to work skillfully with a lot more energy moving through me. So yes, affirming what you're speaking to. It's really, really important.
Yeah, the transformative power of anger, absolutely. Let's talk about your concept of giving back to the soil. As you might know, the indigenous concept of remetration that refers to reclaiming ancestral remains and spirituality, cultural knowledge, and resources, as opposed to the patriarchally associated repatriation. So the concept of repatriation implies a going back to Mother Earth, to a return to our origins, to life and in co-creation. The concept implies a reclamation of germination. Is that what giving back to the soil means as well?
Yes, and I would expand just in terms of the experience and language that has come through me. Number one, I want to affirm that any meditation practice today needs to affirm earth connection, needs to be about that reconnection. And that's part of why I do get concerned sometimes about the overuse of screens and the overlighting of our planet right now, artificial lighting, and the overuse of communication through social media. Come on. So we need to get back to our earth connection as base. But giving back to the soil, I come from many years as an organic gardener and farmer. Some people might know the field of permaculture design. And the process of living sustainably and living regeneratively, both in how we're stewarding land and also in how we're stewarding ourselves and our lives, it has to honor the full regenerative cycle of life, from birth and beginning and generation and ideas we have and projects we start, and to the giving back. The giving back can take so many forms, but sometimes I simply point to giving back through our willingness to acknowledge ourselves and our energy that we're putting out into the world. Sometimes giving back through the process of giving our grief and our tears and our love and our pain for the earth. But we have to be honoring this regenerative cycle of life. Yeah. So I just wrote a book about darkness, but it's really acknowledging that dark and light are partners in the Tao, partners in how all of life on planet Earth responds and thrives. We have a society today in the dominant paradigm, to be specific, that overvalues light and also overvalues beginnings and overvalues youth and overvalues all these things that we could point light to being a symbol of, including rational knowledge. I want to underline that. And we undervalue the dark, the intuitive forms of knowing, okay? The painful parts of our subconscious that are also sacred messengers, the unknown, the mystery itself. We could have a rich conversation about this.
Well, actually, I'm thinking this I'm imagining is part of Luminous Darkness, your next book. What I would like to do is ask you, extend you an invitation to come back when the book is out so we can continue this conversation, because I feel like I can speak for a whole day with you about these issues. And now, it's time for us to close. And I feel like, but I'm so full of questions for her. So I would love to have you back. But is grief and the anger, which it's all interrelated, right? How connected are they to luminous darkness, your engaged Buddhist approach to embracing the unknown. Can you give us a more of a peek into what's coming, and will you come back to say more?
Yes, I would be happy to come back and continue our conversation, and just want to really appreciate your curiosity and creativity and the emergence of your questions as they come through you, and your passion. And darkness is multidimensional. There are so many rich teachings around darkness to connect with. And for now, I'll just acknowledge that in this day and age, I certainly feel that one of the most important things we can give our energy to, individually and collectively, best done in groups, is consciously connecting to our grief, our grief for the loss of living systems that has already occurred on this planet, our grief for being in the unraveling, the dismantling of so many systems humans have relied upon for so long, our grief for the legacy of racism, of colonialism, of racial capitalism, patriarchy. We could go on and on, yeah. Yes. but consciously, and in such a way to honor the emotional alchemy that can happen, and then we give that back to the soil. But we can't plant new seeds until we've done that. We can't. So you have to nourish the soil. You've got to give the compost back. Yeah.
So beautiful, Eden. And I'm really look forward to bringing you back once the new book is out. So thank you so much for your generosity, for joining us, and I look forward to continuing. Thank you for listening to What a Word is Worth. You can access today's interview at Anchor and also on YouTube. And if you are interested, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. And also, if you found our program beneficial, leave us a review. I am with you in love and compassion always.